Hello, and welcome to On the Irregular with me, Java Berry, a podcast where I chat to women from all walks of life about their own unique creative journey, how they got here, how their story has shaped their creative work, what they've learned, what has helped them, and where they plan to go from here. It's an irregular journey for so many of us, and I am delighted to offer a platform to share these fascinating stories and wells of wisdom. In this episode, I talk to Fola Agbalaya, a vintage furniture upholsterer with a passion for mid-century designs. Working from her South Manchester workshop, Fola sources furniture from all over Europe and breathes a new life back into each unique piece. Originally from London, Fola talked to me about her dramatic career pivot in her late 40s after a successful career of working in HR. We talk about the creative pull and allowing ourselves to embrace it, the huge shift of leaving a stable career for a creative path, and what it's like when your initial plan fails. If you're considering making a change or trying out something new, Fola's positivity and determination might just be the boost you need to hear to take that chance. I came away from this chat feeling inspired and excited, and hope you do too. Welcome to episode 1 of season 2 with upholsterer and pep talk extraordinaire, Fola Agbalaya. But yeah, thank you for sending through your, a bit more about your life and your journey. And it was really interesting kind of how you've arrived at where you are. It's so left field from where you were.
Yeah.
Because are you born and bred London then?
Yeah, born and bred South London girl. And only left South London to come to Manchester to come to university in the late 80s.
Right.
I love Manchester. I do miss bits of London, but yeah, so came here, did a couple of years of university before I ran for communications officer for the Students' Union.
Okay. And what did you study at uni?
I did English and history, English and social and economic history,
right.
And didn't have a clue what to do with it. So the whole point of doing the communications officer role, partly I was cajoled into it because that's what my mates were doing, but partly it was like, okay, I need to have a bit of a break because I don't really know what I'm doing. I've landed here. Partly because I wanted to leave London and I wanted a fresh start. Mm-hmm. But then I didn't really know what I was doing. So I took a year out, did that. And that's when I kind of fell in love with Manchester because I wasn't just around students anymore. I was around people who lived in Manchester and, you kind of get to know the city a bit more. And that's when I really fell in love with it. Went back, did my final year of my degree. And actually, I think now, I was thinking about this last night, I think now I probably fell into a little bit of a mild depression because I was completely rudderless. The thing about being a student is you have your social life, you have, your friends, your community, it's all there. It ends. And unless you know exactly what you want to do next, you can feel a bit rudderless.
Totally.
So, and I knew I didn't want to go back to London. I knew I didn't want to go back home in inverted commas because I'd kind of outgrown that and I'd lost a bit of that because people who I grew up with there had moved on as well. So I've been away from home for 4 years. 4 years is a long time in your, late teens, early 20s. So it felt a bit weird then, like, well, what do I do? What do I do? Anyway, luckily, a friend of a friend said, why don't you come and volunteer? And I did. And it was probably the best thing I did in the whole of my 20s.
Oh, wow. So where were you volunteering?
I volunteered at the Zion. It was then called the Zion Community Health and Resource Centre based in Hume.
Yeah, I know Zion.
Yeah. And it was a mental health charity at that time, and it's grown exponentially now. You wouldn't recognise it now, but it's based in Hume, and they had a creche, they had an art group, and they had a women's group. There were lots of little things going on. At the time, were very radical because it was like a one-stop shop. So you could go in, you could get your kid looked after, you could see someone about your housing, you could see someone about your mental health.
That's fantastic.
You could eat. So it was at the time really radical. because now it's kind of a bit more understood that you don't just go from one organisation to the next, that you should be able to go to one place and see a range of people. Not saying it works, but that was the general model and the belief. And I think it works in design. What I mean is I don't think it works everywhere now because of the cuts, and let's not get political, but things are being decimated, as we know. Anyway, so I volunteered there for a little while and loved it. Everyone was welcome, everyone fit in. I'm not saying there weren't any internal wranglings, but it was just such a good place to just have a stop and a think about what you want to do. And one of the things that I really decided I wanted to do was community. That community can be anything, but for me, the real sense of community was what came out, and that's kind of where, strangely, my career spun off eventually into what I ended up with.
When you were growing up as a kid in London, did you have any sense of ideas of your future? Because I know you said that you kind of really leant towards the humanities side.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, and did you know that you were practical with your hands, and that you were? Did you have any idea that even existed, or that there was a particular path that you wanted to go down?
That's a really good question, actually, because I think it was very latent. And again, for my preparation for this, I was thinking about it last night, and what I realised was two things. The first thing was I've always been creative, but it's never necessarily been traditionally creative or creative in a way that was recognised or even encouraged. And the other thing I realised was the expectations of me at school were fairly low. I wasn't particularly, I was average, a B or C student, not very good at maths, rubbish at science, but just kind of general. I wasn't in the bottom sets, I wasn't always in the top sets, kind of bumping along in the middle. And I didn't think they really knew what to do with kids like us at my school. It wasn't a bad school, but I think that I wasn't a top flight student, and I wasn't one of the ones that were really struggling for whatever reason. And so they didn't really know what to do with me. And I think that it was a girls' school, and their general idea was, girls, even in the 80s, 70s, 80s, went to teaching or nursing, unless they were very bright, and then they might go into some sort of academia. But those are the options, really, that I was given. Maybe be a nursery nurse, right, and maybe be a nurse, a medical nurse, and a hospital nurse. And really, I just thought neither of those appealed to me. But at the same time, I had expectations from my parents that were very, very high. And I'm sure if you've spoken to other children of immigrants, the whole purpose of them coming and having their kids here and educating them here is that they do really well and they go to university. That's kind of non-negotiable. And so my parents' expectation was, you're going to go to university and you've got three options. I mean, Gina Yashere, the Nigerian comic, says it best. You can be an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, or a waste of time. And that's, that was generally... So I was stuck in the middle of this, not brilliantly academic, but okay. School kind of like, well, we don't expect much of you. But my parents like, well, you have to do it really well, because that's why we come here. That's why we sacrificed all of this. So there was a real sense of, I can't even begin to think about doing anything creative. Because that's, it's not encouraged at school, but it's really not encouraged at home. So I better knuckle down. And I failed my first set of A-levels. Well, I didn't get enough to get into university. The word fail is quite pejorative, but, I didn't do enough to get into the universities that I'd applied to. So my only option was to do them again. So I went to an FE college and did a couple more and got enough to get into Manchester Uni. And that was what was expected. But even then, I didn't really know what I was supposed to be doing with this humanities degree. I didn't want to be a social worker, which is what some people did. I didn't want to particularly do writing, even though I thought that's what I wanted to do. I realised by the end of it that I was bored of writing, or not it wasn't coming naturally.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, what do you do? So I did, as I said, I did volunteering for a while.
Yeah.
But the expectations and that kind of pull from two sets of worlds was quite stressful, you realise now. It wasn't easy, I don't think. And at the 80s, again, a bit like now, really, were a time of real deprivation and struggle for a lot of organisations, a lot of people. There was a lot of innovation, but the 80s weren't great for a lot of working class communities. You know, and I was in Manchester and Hume, which at the time was undergoing a huge revolution in terms of, you know, housing and regeneration and all this kind of stuff. So to be in that world again and seeing people struggle and thinking, you know, I really want to get stuck in here, I want to help, but I don't know how, I don't feel equipped. You know, again, that was quite difficult. At the same time, I got mum and dad saying, well, when are you going to get a job? What are you doing? When are you coming back to London? You know, that was the other thing. You finished your degree now, you haven't got a job there, come back home. So, you know, bumping around a lot for a long time, I realised I didn't really have a creative outlet formally, although informally, I was doing bits of art. I was, you know, decorating my flat. I was doing little bits of sewing, although it wasn't very good. But, you know, I was doing things, but it was all under the auspices of, well, this is what you do for relaxation. You have to get a real job and earn real money. And I carried that through right up until my 40s, really. That, you know, things that I were doing that were creative were just for relaxation, which there can be, but there was no way of me ever making any career or any money or doing it full time. That just wasn't an option. What came out of the work at the Zion was a local FE college wanted to get a more diverse group of students. So we offered 2 courses in the community. So they were based in the Zion. So we did a counselling course and a nursery, NNEB it was called then, a nursery nurse course. So people didn't have to go into college to do that, which was brilliant. So they brought all the assessors and everything out into the community. And I was part of the group that set that up. And it was fantastic. You know, it was such a good thing to do. And you know, I worked, as you said, I worked in education, and I went on then to work in local government. I worked in housing. I worked in social enterprise, like you said, and charities, and had a really varied career. But there was always that sense of community, and that sense of people being what we used to call at one of the last organisations I worked at, which I won't mention actually, was a strengths-based approach. It's that everybody has strengths, and not that there was a deficit model. There was a deficit model where there was an assumption that the community was lacking and that what it needed was input from outside to help it and make it better. Whereas a lot of the organisations I was drawn to had the opposite of view, which is that this community has a load of strengths. And what we need to do is to work with those strengths and help those people develop and become the best that they can be, and give them what they need. You know, take the blocks out of the way, the obstacles out of the way, because very often the things that are holding people back are actually quite simple, but they need people who are prepared to let the community, the individuals in the community shine and not do to them. So yeah, a lot of those jobs, not all of them, but a lot of them were about that. And it was a really fulfilling career in lots of ways. You know, I did lots of training, which I loved, face-to-face training with people, and I did sort of organisation development, which sounds very fancy, but was about, well, what do people who work in this organisation actually need to be good at their jobs? And again, that was really fulfilling in lots of ways. But you know, Java, there was something that was always missing, and it was always that sense of like, this isn't fitting me. It's very fulfilling in lots of ways, but as I get older and as things are going on, this isn't fitting me in the way that I want it to, or I'm not fitting it in the way that I want to. And actually, ironically, my last job was probably my perfect job in lots of ways, in terms of the criteria that I set myself, in that it was down the road, I could cycle, there was no long commute, I had quite a lot of autonomy, I was fairly senior, I was working in an organisation that I really respected, for a chief executive that I really respected. I had a really nice team of mainly women around me that I worked with, and in some ways it was in my 30s that would have been the perfect job.
Yeah.
It came along when I was in my late 40s, and funnily enough, it's probably having the perfect job that made me realise that actually this isn't it.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Because I realised, well, if I'm not happy now, then maybe this isn't it anymore, because all of my boxes have been ticked.
Yeah.
But something is still not right. And I think that's probably the point at which I thought, okay, so now I need to really just go in to myself and think about what I want to do. And I didn't have a process for doing that. I didn't, go on a sabbatical, or I'd love to have, but I didn't do any of that. I just kind of sat with it for a bit, really. Wow. And funnily enough, we were having one of those staff days, where you talk about your development, your goals and everything. And a lot of the organisations I've worked with have been really good at doing this, but they basically say, so, apart from your work, what are your personal goals? What do you want to do? And, I just blurted it out. I just said, I want to learn how to re-upholster furniture.
And is this...
I don't know where it came from.
Really? It hadn't been on your mind for a while, or...?
I think it must have been. It must have been. Actually, yes, it was, because I had commissioned some furniture to be done. So I'd chosen fabrics for a couple of chairs. We were just having some renovations done, and I wanted some new dining chairs, and I wanted a big armchair to sit in the window of our bay window in a living room. And I think it was that process, because although I didn't do any of the upholstery, I really liked the process of thinking about it, and what fabrics to have and how it would work, and choosing the chairs. And I think that was it. So I think that was at the back of my mind. So it must have just been in there, doing its thing, cooking. Yeah. And then it just fell out.
Wow, that's so powerful. It's like your subconscious really, really, really knew. Like, this is it. This is what you need. This is going to fulfill all the little aspects that feel unfulfilled at the moment.
And what's interesting is I ignored it.
Really?
I ignored that because it felt too far-fetched. I was in my late 40s by this point. Yeah. I thought, who are you kidding? Yeah. When I looked into the courses, there's nothing really very local. There are local providers, but to do the full professional qualification, that would mean travelling down south. It was really expensive. And so I just said, I'll come back to that. But what I'm going to do in the meantime is I'm going to set up my own business selling kitchenware. And I did, and I left work and I set up my business, and that business failed within 6 maybe to 9 months.
Right. Was it modern kitchenware or was it vintage kitchenware?
It was modern. It was modern kitchenware, because I'm an obsessive cook. Yeah. I love cooking, I love eating, I love all that, I love nice spatulas and chopping boards and, jugs and all of that. And it failed because it wasn't creative. Yeah. It was basically administrative. And I hadn't twigged that, stupidly. I hadn't twigged that was the case. So I left and I thought, I'll make money doing this. I didn't actually make any money or very much money. I hated it. Yeah. I thought I wanted a shop. That was the idea. No idea really that getting a shop was going to be really, really difficult. Yeah. Glad now it didn't work out. But, I went to see shops and I applied to rent them, and I was turned down, and I was doing market stalls in all weathers, and people would come and they would, occasionally people would buy stuff and talk to me about stuff, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. I was creative once. Every time I did a market stall, I was creative in that I laid out my stall. Yeah. And that was the only bit of creativity I had. Yeah. I did nice signage, and I tried to do things a bit different, but really it was
Yeah.
It was an administrative slog, and I just didn't like it.
Yeah. I totally get that. I totally get that. As someone running a shop with also having other creative work, like, you know, the other side of that, illustration and writing, it's
Yeah,
really hard to not let the shop just swallow up all of
yeah,
my energy, just
yeah,
purely, yeah, like you said, the admin, just keeping up with the admin is such a huge job. And yeah, doing market stalls is such hard work, like you said, in all weather. And yeah, once you set up the stall, if people aren't coming to the stall to buy, you're just kind of like,
yeah, yeah,
feel so
absolutely.
flat.
I think I like a lot of people got seduced by the, you know, I walk into nice shops in Manchester, I think, oh, it'd be great, it'd be lovely. You
Yeah,
know, look at all this beautiful display. They've got a lovely window display, and look at all this lovely stuff they've got out, and they've chosen and they've handpicked and they've done this and they've done that. But actually, that's only 10% of it. 90% of it is bills, it's invoicing, it's buying, it's dealing with stuff that doesn't sell, it's dealing with customers. It is really, really labor intensive, and none of it really that creative when you think
yeah,
about it. You have to be a very good business person.
yeah, definitely.
Oh, I hear you. I absolutely hear you. And, you know, I do shows, vintage shows, and again, it's similar to doing market stalls, but not the same, and they're not as often, obviously. But yeah, it's a very different thing when you've made something
Yeah,
to sell,
of course.
rather
Yeah,
than selling stuff that other people have made that you just have to put out in pretty patterns. You know, it was
yeah,
a
yeah,
really good lesson for me to listen, because you mentioned your subconscious before,
yeah,
and absolutely your subconscious is so important.
yeah,
Um, because it is doing the work for you. But when it gives you the sign, it's really important to listen. And you know, I don't regret doing the shop, because it taught me a lot, but it also reminded me that I could have listened to my brain that was saying to me, but this is what you want to do.
yeah.
This is what you want to do. Do it.
And it's just
So
you telling yourself, no, no, that can't happen. It's too late.
yeah,
It's too expensive.
yeah, yeah, it's too late, it's too expensive, I'm too old, I don't know where to start, blah, 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 all of that, excuses, excuse after excuse after excuse. And I did do it. I did absolutely go back to upholstery.
So what
Thank
led you
goodness.
back? What changed? Was it because the shop you decided, right, you'd realised this isn't what I want to do? What kind of then gave you the incentive to go after upholstery in a way that you hadn't allowed yourself to before?
Well, I'd left work, which was important, so I wasn't making any money.
Yeah,
I thought, all right, okay, sugar, I need to do something.
yeah.
um, and I went on a course in Manchester, and actually I hated the course, but I really liked the process.
Mhm.
I was hooked on the process. The teaching method wasn't right for me.
Right.
So I thought, right, okay. So I had another thing, and then I looked around and I found someone else who basically was a working upholsterer where you could go and take your stuff to.
Mhm.
So I took a couple of chairs there and was absolutely hooked. It just suited me a lot better, that environment.
Wow.
Absolutely loved it. I thought, oh, this is it. This is what I want to do.
And
And
sorry, what is it that hooks you? Is it the concept? Is the I know that, you know, like you say, you have a real love for design and mid-century design and like kitchen utensils, and you're clearly very aesthetically driven. And was it that, seeing what you could do with the piece? Was it rooted in the manual part of it, of like taking it apart and then putting it back together? I'd love to know what it is that has you so kind of enamored by the whole process.
I think it's that idea of taking something apart, looking at something that looks like trash,
Mm.
usually smells a bit, is just on its last legs,
Hmm.
taking it apart. And when you finish, hopefully, at the end, you've got something that you just think, okay, yeah, now that is worthy of being in someone's house
Yeah.
and being used and being sat on.
So
There's
trying.
something about chairs as well. I know we're not supposed to spend a lot of our time sitting down, but, you know, when you do sit down, you do really want to sit in something comfortable, and you want it to look nice in your house.
Yeah.
The thing about mid-century or older furniture generally is that it's usually so well made. I mean, when you look at these frames, they're incredible. These are really skilled frame makers making stuff out of, you know, beech or oak or teak, you know, that are just incredible. The designs are incredible. And so I'm not really interested in modern furniture, you know. So when people ask me to do modern furniture, I'm like, oh, not really, because, you know, usually when you look inside modern furniture, it's not great. You know, that's just the way things are. Things in the 50s and 60s were designed to be kept for 40 years,
Yeah.
30 years. Things that are made now and in the 90s are designed to be made to last 3 or 4 years, because the fashion changes so much and so quickly.
Yeah.
So, you know, people who make things and design things know that in 4 or 5 years, you're probably going to be thinking, oh, we need to redo this front room.
Yeah.
We'll get a new sofa, which is such a shame.
It really is.
And you can recover new sofas, but very often it's not cost effective, because the price of a new sofa, because they're only designed to last for so long, is usually cheaper than upholstering it properly, if you can at all.
Yeah.
That's always a conundrum. So the drawer is older. The drawer is fixing. I love fabrics. I love pattern. I love design. I'm a bit of a fabric chicken, funnily enough, because if you do look at my stuff, very often it's fairly plain.
It's often
But
very bold, though, like really rich colours,
yes,
and
yeah,
there's
I do
definitely
like.
statement pieces. The ones that you
I think so, and I'd love to do more with pattern, and that's kind of one of the things that I'm looking forward to exploring a bit more this year, is to do stuff more with pattern, because I do think it is more interesting. But, you know, I've been a bit cautious, thinking, oh, I've got to sell this.
Yeah.
Someone's more likely to buy it if it's plain, but I don't think that's true anymore. I think people's tastes are changing. People are looking for more eclectic furniture. You know, they want to be surrounded by stuff that's not just practical, but is stuff that makes them smile.
Yeah.
That makes, you know, that lights their soul. So yeah, that's some going off on a tangent, sorry. So that's the kind of stuff.
Really interesting.
So that's the kind of stuff that I'm drawn to, really. And I suppose there is something about doing stuff with my hands. You know, I've put on Instagram before, you know, my hands they're quite slim, and they're got quite long fingers.
Yeah.
And I did play the violin at school. Not particularly well. But, you know, I quite liked it. It was what was expected at the time. And if you showed an interest. And all I used to do with my hands was tip tap on a computer and point at people. And, you know, I didn't really do anything with them. And when I started doing upholstery, I really appreciated, actually, that being manually dexterous is really a blessing in lots of ways. You know, it's a fantastic thing to have. And I just love the fact that these hands that didn't really do much can do quite complicated and, you know, difficult stuff, and they have to pull and grip and hold down, and, you know, they get cramp, and I staple my finger and I jab them and I cut them, and they heal. It's amazing. They heal. You know, they fix themselves. It's incredible. I mean, obviously, I've not chopped anything off. They don't grow back, you know, but, you know, it's incredible to think what you can do with your hands. And I'm really appreciative of this opportunity to do something with them. And by extension, you know, the rest of my body, it's quite physical upholstery. You know, you're moving. It's fantastic. I love it.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful that you feel grateful for your hands. What a lovely way to feel.
Yeah. Yeah, I am really, really grateful for them.
Yeah.
And, you know, the downside of that is, of course, I'm getting older. How long is this going to last? So I'm just making the most of it. I don't know. I'm just making the most of it. Yeah. There are some upholsterers who are still working in their 80s. So there's, you know, if I look after myself and get the right tools, there's no reason why I can't.
Yeah.
If I want to.
Of course.
And so do you work out of a workshop, don't you? Is it in a mill?
Yeah, one of the best things of 2021 was to get a space in a mill in Stockport, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Again, it's really, yeah, really helped me because it's my own space, so I don't have to, share it or go into anybody else's. Well, I share it with a friend who does the same thing, but it's just the two of us. And all through lockdown, we were still able to go in because it's big and we could separate ourselves, and it was just fantastic to have that to go to when I know a lot of people couldn't go into work. It was really good to be able to still go in and do that.
What does an average day look like for you? Do you have an average day?
Um, yes and no. They can be very varied, but I have regular tasks, I suppose. So generally, if I'm going to work, I go in, try and get in anytime between 9 and 10. It can be much, it can be 8 or it can be 11.
Mm-hmm.
I generally just carry on working on whatever project I've got. If I'm not there, then often I'm picking stuff up. So I do drive around picking up bits of furniture. I tend to spend most of the day there now,
Mm-hmm.
and then try and avoid rush hour traffic if I can. Come home, do a bit of admin. So admin, I'm laughing. I'm saying admin. What I mean is go on Instagram. And I do have to occasionally do invoices and all of that, but it's very little of my time really is spent doing that. What I have got to do at the moment is my tax return, which I'm kind of putting off, but I will
Oh
get to
yeah,
that.
you and me both. You and me both.
Yeah, this weekend is my plan to do that.
Oh, that's very good of you.
So, so yeah, just not really an average day. If I'm not at work, then I tend to I like to go for walks. I like to cook. I do a bit of pottering in the house. I've got loads of house plants, so I do a lot of potting, watering,
Mm-hmm.
dusting leaves. Just that's my happy place, just zoning out with them.
Yeah.
I like walking. I do like walking, but I live in Manchester, so I need to be realistic. It's not always going to be nice. It's going to be wet and cold, and today's pretty awful.
Mm-hmm.
So I do wrap up and go out. I've got a dog, I've got to, but if I can't get out, if I'm not out, then yeah, communing with my plants is really the way that I just relax and enjoy.
Restorative.
Yeah, definitely.
And how have you found the shift, or I guess you've been doing it for a long time now, but how did you find the shift from working what I imagine would have been a possibly more structured
Very.
way to then, working for yourself and not having anybody holding you to, I don't know, holding you accountable or it just being all on you. How was that shift?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point actually, because that was definitely a transition. It wasn't easy. Even though I was fairly senior and had I had a lot of autonomy and I could organise my own days, my own workload. There is something very different about being totally accountable for your time. So if I spend 3 hours on Instagram in a day, which I don't generally, but if I do, then, and I've not earned any money, then that's up to me. That's my lookout. Whereas if you wanted to, you could probably spend 3 hours on Instagram at work if you had, your back to, no one could see your screen. And, there are all sorts of ways of dodging work at work. And so I think, but you still get paid, you still get paid at the end of the month.
Definitely.
Assuming you don't get caught. So there is something about the accountability for your own time being really very in your face. You just know that, right, I've not wasted, but I've spent that time doing that, which means I've not done these other things that go towards earning me money. So it's definitely transitional. And I think, I'm quite list bound. I do like lists. It's partly because I like notebooks, but I do like writing lists, and I do like giving myself things to do. But I get distracted very easily, and I get distracted at work. So I might be at work, supposed to be working on something, and if I'm a bit tired or a bit sad, I've even got house plants at work, so there's one distraction. but I can be distracted by looking at reading books. I mean, they're upholstery books, but I don't need to read them right then and there. Or I can be looking at fabrics that aren't anything to do with what I'm working on. There are all sorts of ways of not being on the clock. But that's part of the beauty of it as well, is that your brain can work in all sorts of different ways, and you can still be absorbing information and getting inspiration and still working towards your creativity in a whole load of different ways. And I think for me, it suits me to not be so structured. And I just have to hold myself accountable. Yeah. So if I'm choosing to have a very unstructured day, and like I'm probably not going to go into work today, I've done Pilates, talking to you, I'll probably go for a walk, clean the bathroom. That's absolutely fine. That is absolutely fine. But I've made space for that in my life, in my work, because I know that next week I'm going to be working really hard. I've got a few commissions to do. I've got my tax return. I've got all these other things. So there is something about allowing yourself to go there, but holding yourself accountable for it as well. So don't freak out. Just think, okay, well, I've done that, and now I have to do this to kind of to make up for that, to compensate for that.
I feel like you've just given me a pep talk. Thank you.
That wasn't my intention, because all I can talk about is what really works for me.
No, it's really, really good to hear you saying something that I know in my head and I can talk about, but still need to be reminded of.
Absolutely. I need to remind myself on a regular basis. I really do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because it is, I don't know, I can get myself into that kind of panic of well, I've got to be, if I'm not working all the time, then everything's going to fall apart. And it's not the case. It's not the case. Like you said, it's about understanding that you, like you said, you work that into your frame of time.
Yeah.
You know that some points, yes, you've got a bit more leeway and a bit more flexibility, and other times because you're going to be working harder, and that's just the way it is, and it doesn't need to fall within a 5 days a week 9 to 5 structure.
It's really funny, isn't it? Because if you think about it, we go to school, we go to uni maybe, or we go to work. Certainly of my generation, my whole life has been structured on Monday to Friday, weekends off. That's just the way that it was.
Yeah.
And to suddenly stop that, and it was I kind of went part-time, but a lot of people who work part-time know that actually it isn't always part-time. But I dropped hours technically, and then I was on my own, doing my own thing. And I tell you, that first month was hell.
Yeah.
Because not only was I working, doing something I didn't really want to do, which was the shop, I was just like, whoa, this is weird. There is no structure. You have to make the structure. Yeah. You have to decide what you do. And I could do meal times, and my partner goes out to work, so he was going off and coming back, and and I was thinking, right, okay, so I can cook nice dinners. I like cooking, that's fine. It wasn't a expectation, but oh my God, it's so weird and so easy to get into. Oh, I'll just watch this. Oh, this is interesting. I'll just watch rubbish on the telly or watch rubbish on your computer, and there is discipline in having an unstructured life. It isn't undisciplined.
Definitely.
It's a different way of doing it, but there is definitely discipline that's needed. Yeah, if you're gonna have a life. Yeah,
it's interesting what you were saying as well about if you're at work and you can probably get away with doing stuff that, like you said, if you don't get caught, you you said, going on your phone or whatever, and then but you'll get paid at the end of the month, and it's so true. I think I am so much more productive working for myself than I ever was working in other jobs. Like, I'd get the work done, sometimes I'd get more than needed to be done, but a lot of the time would just be kind of passing the time, or okay, how am I going to get lunchtime, or how can I avoid that job for a while? Whereas now what was it? Somebody, oh, it was Laura Adams, who I run the workshops with. She was talking about swallowing the frog, and
Yes.
and I'd never heard this before, but it's that
Yeah.
you swallow the hardest job that you've got to do. You
Yeah.
get that out of the way first thing in the day, and it's something that I didn't used to do in when I
Yeah.
worked in other jobs. But now that I work for myself, it's like, well, I'm either going to torture myself all day,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
that hanging over me, or I'm just going to get it done and do it
Yeah.
immediately. And I
Yeah.
feel like I'm such a better, more efficient worker.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
it takes, like you said, like it's taken a while. It wasn't
Yeah.
immediate. It's definitely learning and learning
Yeah.
about yourself, like,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
how you work
Yeah. There
best.
is.
And
Yeah. I mean, it's funny if I was to go back into any of a job like my old job, which I'm not intending to, but if I was, I think I'd be a much better employee
that's it.
because I know how I work,
Yeah.
and I know what wastes time, and I know where all the pitfalls are for just whiling away a couple of hours. It's so easy to do, and it's easy to do at work. Not the extreme of Instagram, but it's very easy to get bogged down in you're writing a report or doing your KPIs or whatever whatever it is you're doing,
Mm.
and it's very easy to just stretch that,
Yeah.
to stretch it and stretch it and stretch it, and to be distracted, and to start getting bogged down in all sorts of things that actually aren't that important.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that the KPIs aren't important. It's not that the report is important. It's just the way that you're going about it.
Mm.
It's all about, oh, well, if I give myself Tuesday to do that, you don't need all of Tuesday to do it. Or if you do, you could do some of it on Monday and some of it on Wednesday. There are ways of just structuring it, but it's so easy when you're in an office and in that environment. And because you've got all these other pressures of meeting this and that meeting and that phone call and this and that and the other, never mind what might come into the office unexpectedly. Someone just comes up to you and says there's an emergency, or someone wants a chat or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I just really am mind blown by how much time I wasted at work,
Yeah.
and how much I don't do that in the same way when I work for myself, because the consequence is just there in your face. If you waste time,
Yeah.
it's only you that is going to suffer, and it's only you that is going to be aware of that consequence. And you work for yourself, you've got your own reputation to protect. What I don't want to do is to be saying to clients constantly, oh, well, or customers, oh, well, yeah, I said I'd get that done last week, but I haven't,
Yeah.
It just doesn't sit well. And that adds stress. I have a waiting list, so people understand that I do have a waiting list and that I won't get things done, immediately. But everyone I've worked with so far, touch wood, has been fantastic about that, and they expect that and they understand that.
Yeah.
But I don't want to put more pressure on myself by then spending half the day watching Homes Under the Hammer or whatever it is, or Columbo, my current favourite, because I can't be bothered. I haven't got that luxury.
Yeah.
Whereas, it's easier. I think even for me, it was easier in my other job to kind of make those things work. To make those jobs stretch, because that's what was kind of expected almost. So yeah.
Yeah. It's such a huge learning curve. It's really
Massive.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And I guess, possibly, and that's why it's not for everyone either. I think,
Absolutely.
because you've got to be really, really honest with yourself,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and just really take responsibility for yourself, I suppose. And
Absolutely. Some people like structure. They need that structure.
yeah,
And that's absolutely fine. That is, if you get that and that's what you need, crack on.
yeah,
That's absolutely fine. It's just that I was suffocating a bit under that structure.
yeah. I think that's really interesting as well, because I think I used to be one of those people. I think I definitely used to need structure, and I still do to an extent. I still really do need my days to be structured, but I think things really changed as I grew older, because my mum had always worked for herself, and I'd always thought, oh, I don't know if I could do that. I liked kind of knowing where I stand, and I think it was for me getting older and realizing that if I was going to make work out of my creativity, that I was going to have to take that on myself. I couldn't wait for somebody else to
Yeah.
notice that in me and employ me to do that. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I need to do this myself. And then maybe having kids as well, which then
Yeah.
gave me some kind of frame to the day.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
it's
I
like,
bet.
yeah, so it's like, well, I've got to get them up in the morning and I've got to get them to bed at night. And then, there's feeding them and stuff. So within
Yeah.
that structure itself, so it's like they are my boss, basically,
Yeah.
setting the hours of the day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I do my work within that. So it's an unexpected structure for me,
Yeah. Yeah.
but one that's actually really worked for me and has kind of helped push me towards working for myself. Um,
That's really interesting, because I think the way that you described that is another way of freeing yourself or giving yourself an alternative. And I think for women particularly, we need to be looking for and learning from the alternative ways of structuring your life, because it is different for a lot of men. If men are in heterosexual relationships and they have a partner who does most of the childcare and most of the housework, their lives look very different. Their structure is very, very different.
yeah.
And I'm not going to judge that as right or wrong, but for a lot of women who are looking for something a bit alternative, finding your structure is freeing. And it can be kids, but it can also be, I don't know, part-time work, or it can be something completely creative and working for yourself. It can be, doing stuff for community. There are lots of ways of structuring your lives that are alternative, but you just have to find it and go with it. And I think that sometimes we're told, but this is the way that you do things. You get up. In your case, it would be getting the kids up, getting them off to school, and then you go to work, and your day is structured by what happens in that job. And for a lot of us, that isn't working anymore. And I think particularly during the pandemic, and seeing the number of women who are working at home with the kids and trying to teach their kids, I mean, it really just highlighted, didn't it, that for women, actually talking about the luxury of talking about structure and and creativity and free, it just isn't there for a lot of people in the way that we expected. It's just much, much more complex than that.
Yeah.
Right. I think finding your flow and finding your way of being in your work and in your life is very, very freeing, but you have to find it.
Yeah.
And often there isn't a blueprint. And that's what I think I struggled with, was there was no one else really around me that was doing what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else was still going to work. So, my dream of meeting people for lunch and having cups of tea, and forget it, everyone's in work and working really hard. Everyone that I knew anyway. And so that I had to find my own community, and I had to find my own way of being in the day when everyone else was still having that very strict, structured work life.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think finding that is really important. And I will say it's very different for men. It just is.
Yeah.
In a patriarchal society, not every man.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there are many men who live in alternative ways, but for a lot of men, it's very, very different.
Yeah,
I know it is for my partner. So
no, it's so true. I hadn't really thought about it actually until we're talking now, that it's true that there isn't a blueprint, and it is about just finding, like you said, just finding what works for you and being open to the endless ways of finding the structure that suits you, whatever way that is. And I think that comes down to, again, the panic or the worry that we're not doing it right, that we're not, oh, is this okay? Is it okay for this structure to work for me? Or but that person does that, so surely that's the proper way, and that's how you're supposed to do it. And that's so limiting, and it can be paralyzing, because
very much.
Yeah, and so you're right, it is just so much about just, okay, well, what works for me? And I guess experimenting and And it can take a while. It really can take a while, and
it's transitional. It's not going to happen overnight. You are going to fall into old ways. You're going to miss your old ways. I missed it at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because it was what I knew.
Also, working with colleagues is very different, isn't it? To only being on your own, not having somebody to bounce ideas off or to.
Yeah. But funnily enough, the other thing that I've realised about myself is that I actually quite enjoy my own company. I don't mind being on my own. I don't mind working on my own. I mean, I like working with the woman, the woman I share a space with, Katie. Yeah. I love working with her. She's very different to me, but it's nice to have someone to chat to. But also when she's not there, that's also fine. I'm not bothered. I'm not freaked out. I like being on my own. If I've got the radio, I'm happy. But that's something I hadn't really appreciated. And because my job was a lot of talking, I was training officer for a long time. And then as I progressed in my career, I was doing more sort of HR and organizational development stuff, as well as running a service. I spent a lot of time talking, a lot. And, I very rarely got time on my own. And I realized now, actually, if I was to go back into work, I'd want time on my own.
Yeah.
Really would. I'm just one of those people that does need time on my own. I think they're called ambiverts. So I can be very extrovert, but I can also be very introverted. And I just need to recharge. Actually, I do just need time on my own. I didn't know that about myself until I stopped working in an office.
God, isn't that just so brilliant that you can just keep on finding out stuff about yourself as life goes on?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this has been, obviously, apart from the joy of doing what I do and learning the technicalities of what I do, this has just been, it's almost like a second puberty because you're changing so much.
Yeah.
You are changing. You think about puberty, it's the point of, it's a mega change, isn't it, in your life? Not just your body, but your teenage years and how your brain works and how you form friendships and relationships and what you like and what you don't like and all of that. It's a big, messy time. This has almost been like a second one of those times, in terms of how do I work? What do I like? What do I want? Who do I want to be? Where do I fit in? Who's my tribe? Even my body's changed from sitting down all right, Christmas hasn't been kind, but in terms of, how do I, my body, what do I want from my body? Well, I want it to be strong. I need it to be strong, which is why I need to keep active. And, all of those things are major changes, which I hadn't anticipated when I said, I'm going to give up this office job and do something else. It's been completely life-changing.
Wow. It sounds extraordinary. All from you blurting out, I want to try upholstering furniture.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I love it. And it's really interesting because I don't know if there's a bit of a naff comparison, but when you were talking about what you love about you're turning chairs into chairs that already exist, you're making them presentable and useful again, and you're giving them a second life, and it's like that's a mirror of, sounds like, yourself. You are changing. You have had a transformation, both internally, externally, on multiple levels. So it's like,
wow,
you're being reupholstered.
that was like a moment of therapy then. That was incredible. No, really, that really held up to me a mirror that I hadn't even thought about. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Everything. The way that I dress, obviously that's had to change. Everything, my hair, everything, my outlook. Gosh, wow. Yeah, of course. That's brilliant. I hadn't realised. And what I wanted to say before was my business is called Square 2 Furniture. The whole idea being, we talk about going back to square one, so here we are, we're back to square one. I didn't want to go back to square one because square one isn't always where we needed to be. I wanted to be on square 2. And that was the whole idea with the chairs, is that you're taking it from what it was to something new.
Yeah.
But actually, yeah, you're right. Me too, actually. Yeah.
You're at square
Yeah.
two. Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah,
Gosh.
it really struck me when you were saying that about your body as well, about how that's changed. And so, like, yeah, your internal structure, your outward structure, and then it's interesting to think about your clothes. Of course, all that's changing. No, it sounds like, yeah, you've had a really powerful transformation.
It has been transformative, and I mean, I don't know who listens and what people will be thinking about when they listen to this, but one of the things I did want to say, if you don't mind, is
go ahead.
it's been completely transformative, which has been fantastic. But you know, it's also been very liberating, and there's definitely a fear, I think, for a lot of us, and I saw it when I was in work, that what you're going to be losing is too much. So I'd love to do what you do, but I'm frightened I won't earn the money, or I'm frightened of because my pension's due in a few years, or you know, I'm frightened of all of this stuff. And I absolutely get that. And I just want to be clear, you know, I didn't have a trust fund. I didn't have any money behind me. I was just that desperate that I took the plunge. And we were poor at the beginning, poor in inverted commas. I'm not talking about poverty stricken, but you know, money was tight for us at the beginning. I don't have kids. That makes a massive difference. I recognise that. And I do know, obviously, I'm coming from a position of privilege. I've got a house, for God's sake. And I know that not everybody's in that position. I absolutely get that. I don't want to come across as some sort of, oh, just do it, you know, wanker, because that doesn't help when you're renting, or you're not in secure employment or whatever. You know, I understand all of those things. But I also know that a lot of the fear that we have is often a fear of change. It isn't actually the fear of, it's not a tangible fear. And the came point for me, the tipping point for me was, I can't do this anymore. If I have to write one more report, do one more supervision, do one more set of key performance indicators, I'm going to go mad. It just got to that. Even though I was in the job that was perfect, in inverted commas, I just knew it wasn't right for me anymore. And that was that fear of almost becoming quashed completely is what drove me, because I thought, it doesn't matter how frightening it is. The thought of being here is more frightening. The thought of never trying is more frightening. And for a while, for a year, maybe 18 months, I left myself a door open. I can always go back. I can always go back. I've got transferable skills. I can always go back. And that was always on my mind. And I never did. And I'm glad, hopefully I'll never have to. That's not my intention. But I think for a lot of people, and particularly women again, that fear of change, that fear of all the things we just talked about, no structure, what's money going to be like, all of that is bigger than actually the thing that you're doing, if I'm making sense. And so I would encourage anybody who's listening, who's not sure, and I know this isn't a pep talk, but for anyone who isn't sure or is thinking about it, try it. Just try it, because you don't know. And you don't want to be lying on your deathbed thinking, oh, I wish, you know, I wish I'd tried. And it might not work. My first business failed. And you might have to go back, but that's okay. You know, that is also all right. You might not, you know, you might not. It might be the best thing you ever did. And one of my biggest fears, well, there are a few things I was worried about, and we won't have time to touch on them all, but representation was one. I didn't see any other Black women doing upholstery. There are, but I didn't see them at the time. I was worried about what's it called? What do they call it? I can't remember. It's gone out of my head. But you know when you think you're not good enough?
Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome, that's it. This feeling, there's no way I'm good enough. There's just no way that I am good enough. I've not done the official training. Don't forget, I came from a background of O-levels, A-levels, university degree, professional qualification, master's degree. I had all of those things, behind me. So I felt qualified in my work.
Yeah.
Suddenly I'm leaving. I'm back at the bottom. You know, I'm going back 30 odd years, starting again, where I don't know anything. That's really weird in your late 40s, early 50s. That is very strange.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's the whole thing about status. What do you tell people when you're at a party and they ask you what you do? For ages, when people said to me, so what do you do? I would say, oh, well, I used to work in HR. And I just think, they didn't ask you what you used to do. They asked you what you do now. But all of that was about, I'm not good enough. This isn't legitimate. This isn't real. All of that stuff from the teenage years, and, you know, the whole thing about creativity not really being a way of making money just came back. So I get all of that. And the only way I dealt with it was just to sit with it. I mean, I'm lucky I have some very good, clever female friends who are happy to talk this stuff through with me, and that helped loads. But definitely that feeling of, your whole life being turned upside down, it is scary. There's no way of hiding from that. So, you know, when I used to read Elle Decoration about somebody who was a banker in the city who left all that world behind to set up their business selling beautiful things, or maybe even making beautiful things, I used to look at that and think, yeah, she's got all of that money behind her, and she was only in her 30s probably. It's no one in particular, but I do remember regularly reading things and thinking, okay, she's got money behind her, she's got a house that's paid for, she's got contacts, she can afford to fail financially, at least a little bit. I never had any of those things, and for a long time, though, that's what I thought I had to have. You know, I thought I had to have all of these things in place. I had none of that in place for either business. But the desire to change and to do something is probably what got me through. Nothing more than that. Oh, and some good friends, but, you know, nothing more than that.
Well, I've got tingles listening. Like, honestly, I've got goosebumps all over my arms. Wow.
For most of us, there isn't a pathway to follow. There isn't a framework. There isn't the blueprint. That it's just us and an idea and a desire. And the one thing I do love about Instagram is that you can build community. You know, you can build community on there. I was on Twitter and I hated Twitter.
Oh my God, yeah. Somebody described it to me recently as a bus station where everyone's shouting at each other and trying to shove flyers in each other's faces.
Yeah. Oh, that's just perfect. That is just perfect. A few drunks as well. It was. Anyway, I'm not on Twitter anymore. But I love Instagram. Not all of it, but a lot, because I felt, certainly, you know, over the past 4 years, I've been able to build a community there. You know, I haven't got loads of followers, but people engage and people chat, and I talk to other people and I learn stuff. And that's how I would never have met you without Instagram. You know, Sophia, again, somebody who I chat with on a regular basis, who I know you're going to do an interview with. Michaela Sharp, again, another Black woman who does upholstery. You know, there are lots of people. There's a woman in America, Nicole Crowder. She's a Black woman who does upholstery. She's the first Black woman who I saw actually on Pinterest, and I contacted her. And again, you know, she lives in America. We're probably never gonna meet, but we support each other. You know, we just exchange ideas. It's fantastic. It's just that sense of community, again, another theme, has been brilliant. And that's what you need, I think, to take you forward. And you'll find that in all sorts of different places. It doesn't have to be online. But that's what I needed to get me through, really, was that. It wasn't a trust fund. It wasn't, you know, $1 million in the bank and a big house and loads of contacts in the city. It was just a community, not just, but it was a community. It was my friends and a desire to to change and to enjoy the life that I was living.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like you've kind of summed up pretty much everything that has come out over the last couple of years for me, and in doing the podcast and having all these conversations with other women, and everyone comes back to these points of community and support. And I don't think I've spoken to anyone who's come from money, actually, because I think that's a really important thing to talk about, because similar, I don't come from money, and when I started my business, I started it because I didn't have any money, and I realized that I had no, I wanted to buy John a birthday present, and I realized I was going to have to use his money to buy him a birthday present, and I just felt so depressed about that. So it was like, right, okay, I've got to figure something out for myself here. And I think, it's not easy. It's really, really not easy, but there are ways. And like you said, it doesn't mean you're going to succeed immediately. You might fail. You might fail multiple times. You might go back to work for a while, but it is possible. It is possible to work through it. And community and support, and I guess finding people that you can identify with, and you can support each other in different ways. Yeah,
absolutely. And obviously I've got a very supportive partner as well, which is really helpful. Again, that helps in ways that you don't even really appreciate.
mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm very lucky is because I was the breadwinner for a very long time in our relationship. I earned the money, I bought the house, I did all of this stuff. But that changed when I left, and that was a massive hit to the guts. Suddenly I haven't got the money to just do what I want, and buy what I want. And again, with my family, that was a real change, because I was the rich auntie. I bought them extravagant birthday presents to all my nieces and nephews, and sent them money, and suddenly that that had gone. But my partner is very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
And he earns good money. He's a builder. He earns good money, and he's more than happy for that to have flipped, and for him to support me. And he's the rich uncle, and that's fine. And they don't care, as long as they get the money and the presents. They don't care where it comes from. And although it was quite hard for me personally, and still is sometimes, when I'm a bit short one month and I go, I might need a bit of, and he's never made a big issue of it. And in fact, a friend of mine pointed out it's probably very good for our relationship. I think he actually quite likes the fact that he is now able, or wants to, and is happy to be in that position. And again, I would never have known that if I hadn't made the step. I would have always assumed, well, it was down to me. It's down to me. I'm the one that earns. And it's like, well, no, not necessarily. Don't put that pressure on yourself. It doesn't have to be like that. And you don't know what good things will come out of it. And that was one of the really good things that came out of it. Our relationship is stronger because he has to step in when I'm a bit short, and I'm not the big money earner anymore. And yes, we've managed to adapt to living on less money, and that's fine. We weren't big spenders anyway. But now if we do want to do anything extravagant, go on holiday, he pays for it. And that's a massive change. My own ego gets in the way of that, but our relationship is better for it, definitely. So if you've got that, use it. If you have that opportunity, whoever it is, then go for it. You just don't know. You just don't know.
Gosh. Wow, thank you so much for sharing all of this with me. You've shared not just your linear journey and path with me, but also so much that like you said, that's really quite, personal, that you've learned about yourself and about your life, and about the huge change in your life, and then also looking back. I mean, it's really, it's breathtaking. It's really breathtaking, and hearing the passion in your voice, and how important it clearly is to you, and how passionate you are about your work, and about giving yourself permission to do this for yourself and to change your life in this way. It's incredibly inspiring and invigorating, and yeah, thank you so much. I feel truly honoured that you've shared, that you've been open and shared that, and given your time to share.
I've loved it. And I've I have learned a lot about myself in doing it and reflecting and thinking back. Yes, it's been really good for me actually to think back and to look back and to think about where I am and my transformation, and to give myself permission, as you said, to change and to be what I am.
Yeah.
In the face of it all. And it's not, I mean, I know it's a cliche and I keep saying it, it's not easy, it's not straightforward, but change in itself is not easy and straightforward, but it can be incredibly liberating and invigorating.
Yeah.
And it's not that you have to do this with your life, it's just that you can do it with your life.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be upholstery, it can be anything. It's just that sense of living a life that you want to live, and that was more important to me than anything, I think, that I was achieving in my career.
Yeah.
And that's what did it for me. So
oh my goodness, yeah, no,
I'm glad you've enjoyed it. I'm really glad you've enjoyed it.
You can find Fola's beautiful upholstery work online at square2furniture.co.uk and on Instagram at square_2furniture. Please refer to the show notes for links. Thank you so much for listening to On the Irregular. Please make sure you review and subscribe, as it helps other listeners find us.